And welcome back to Berlin, Germany, where tonight's series is tied up at 1-1. Now, of course, a title match in Copenhagen, the chance to hoist the trophy is a week away. And Deficio, I thought it's only appropriate to talk about the two Danes that are fighting for a shot there. Let's start with Wonder. One of the things that we talked about coming into the matchup was Wonder's performance at G2 when it comes to tanks and when it comes to carries. And his Swain performance shows me his carries are still amazing.
I mean, when you have Wonder up in the top lane, no matter who else is on this team, you put him on carries and you play around him in the early game because he's proven to be one of the absolute best laners when it comes to these top laners here in Europe. And he can actually play tanks. Yeah. That's not the problem
But why is the win-loss 4-4 on the tanks then with G2 Esports?
Because when you play a tank top lane, you're going to rely on other people to carry. And then we have to look towards the bottom lane, which has not been the lane G2 wanted to play around all split long. So when they had Wonder on tanks, it became the one-man perk show. And when he tried to be the solo carry, he went a little bit too far. And he ended up, having too much pressure on him. So the fact that they don't play around the bot lane very often means that they need Wonder to be a person they can always look towards.
Gangplank in game 1, it went okay. Slightly messy game. Swain in game 2, phenomenal. I mean, look at these plays I heard you and Amazing talking about on the analyst desk. Is he going to get that again? He shouldn't.
It feels like at this point, if the teams keep leaving Swain open, they've figured out a brilliant game plan against it. So far, we've not seen that. We've seen 2 games of Swain just being an absolute monster, especially in team fights, because he's so difficult to kill. And then he can also one-shot your carry. So that's kind of a little unfair trade. If you play this simple Caitlyn here. TP in behind you is a Swain. You can't kill him, he can kill you.
I'm very glad you bring up the Caitlyn because, of course, Wonder's former teammate, Kobe, the other Dane fighting for a shot. Played Sivir in game 1. It went pretty well. Played the typical Sivir late game, get 500 CS win button. But his Caitlyn shut down. Okay, so what does Kobe have to do now along with Splyce to bounce back?
Well, if we look at what Splyce could do bot lane when they play all these range supports, is they could try and go for some winning lanes. It's not something that's been a big deal for them during the split, but we know Kobe and Kathink can try and go towards it. Otherwise, strong late game, buff up Kobe like they're trying to do with Zillion or Janna, and just make sure you don't have a multiple losing lane so you fall too far behind, because we know that going to the late game, Splyce will trust a lot in Kobe. And I think most of us will say Kobe over Yanan at the moment, and with how Splyce are playing around the AD carry. So we have now seen late game Splyce in game 1, Kobe took over. We've now seen early game G2 in game 2, and Wonder definitely took over.
I have one last thing which you don't know is coming, Deficio, because earlier today we all saw the fans at home. Who do you think is going to carry their team to the finals? I have a tweet from @UnuMikuts. He said, I think Splyce will take it along with Kobe, using the classic magic misdirection. Everybody looks at the top, the jungle, the holy trinity that you keep talking about, but the real magic happens bottom. True or false?
With how Splyce draft and pick for laning phase, it will not happen early game. They will have to wait for late game and then have to team up anyway with the guys from the top and the jungle. So I don't think we are looking at the wrong lane when it comes to who's getting hit early. Also because Zyra Khan is back.
He hates being called out. So thank you very much for that tweet. Keep tweeting them at us. Let's see how the teams play, because as the players are looking to build their legacy and make it to Copenhagen, we're going to hear from somebody who already has a legacy. It's G2 Esports owner Ocelot.
Having a legacy means that whatever it is that you've done in the past is positive enough for fans to remember over time. And that's something that it's invaluable. And that's something that at the end of the day is what this is all about, right? You invest, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week working for this one passion that unless you have those moments, it's not worth it. But those moments come every now and then, and there's nothing more refreshing and more inspiring than that.
Fame is fleeting, but legacy lasts forever, Vedius.
Okay. I feel like you've heard that before.
No, just made it up off the top of my head.
Really nice phrase.
Sometimes
I think
just got to
catchy, I feel. Really catchy. Great to hear from Ocelot. He's definitely achieved a lot with his time on G2. And also, back in the day when he was the mid laner, I will never forget the day he lost to XPeke at that wonderful tournament.
Yeah, one of the most famous plays in the history of esports, well, League of Legends at least. However, I think Ocelot had the last laugh, considering how the organizations ended up. We're going to get into Champion Select in just a second, but before we do, Vedius, I want to say that G2 had signed selection this game, and they decided to be on blue side.
Interesting. They have changed up things coming into Game 3. Funnily enough, their bans are going to stay pretty much the same. Fascinating that Splyce still sticking with the Kha'Zix ban. Yanko's not really known during the regular season for his Kha'Zix, but definitely likes to be active. He likes to be a playmaking jungler, someone that can dish out the damage and have much more of an influence than, say, on one of these tank junglers. So G2, they're just going to stick to what they did in Game 2.
Yeah, the Zac, the Xayah, and the Trundle, and there's no Swain ban. That's locked in. And before we say this is the worst decision ever, this is the worst thing that Peter Dunn could have done, I want to say maybe they have a strategy. Maybe they know how they're going to deal with this Swain. And I also want to hedge my bets, because if they do, I want to sound like I was supporting them from the get.
So what we've got to look at it is, what Splyce have said is, they've gone back to the drawing board and they've said, was Swain the reason why we lost? And they probably said, no. When they looked at it, they probably evaluated the Swain was a problem, Swain was a threat, and if they fall behind, he becomes a big issue in these late game fights. But he was not the reason why they lost the game, and so they feel that given better execution, they can play around it. And coming into Game 3, if they fail to do that, maybe they'll raise the value in terms of banning it away. But we will see how things progress. As Splyce, they've actually decided to lock in a jungler that Xerxes has yet to play this split.
Yeah, grabs the Olaf for himself. A bit more aggressive, can do more in the early game with that undertow. Last game on the Sejuani, he really struggled to have any impact early on. It's going to be the Gnar as well for Oda-Wamne. He's only played that once before this split, so a lot of firsts here for Splyce.
Looks like it. G2 sticking with a very similar draft to what they've had in the past. G2 going for a very early Thresh. With the Tahm Kench banned out, they are forcing Splyce into a support pick, which Kasing is not comfortable on. We talked a lot about this last week. We have to bring it up again. This guy's Braum and Taric are not the best.
No.
He is much more comfortable on range supports. He seems to have much more success when he's on a lane-dominant kind of utility provider, like the Janna or the Lulu or even the Zilean. And by going up against the Thresh, it becomes very difficult for him to play those kinds of champions. So I like the draft here from G2. Feels like they've come in pretty well prepared for Game 3.
Splyce will lock in the Rise as well to round out their first phase, and now we're getting towards those bans. It's an Alistair taken away by G2, something that is relatively good into the Thresh. Might see the Braum banned away as well. Splyce got rid of the Cassiopeia themselves, and then may look towards another mid lane ban if they really want to solidify Niski in a good position.
So we heard on the before we came to game from Deficio that he wants to see more winning lanes from Splyce. Now, Gnar, typically pretty strong during the laning phase. You would expect it to go top into the Swain, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, the Swain can still be flex picked into both the Rise and the Gnar, which means that this actually isn't too bad from Splyce. We saw Perks getting a lot of early pressure when he was up against the Rise in Game 1, and I feel like Gnar is a slightly easier matchup that you can look to take advantage of the relatively short range that Swain does have.
So something that does work into Thresh that is a range support is the Morgana.
It's very true.
Which is what Splyce are going to secure for themselves. Have left their AD carry for last, which is not something we always see. With a Caitlyn and a Xayah ban, you are looking towards perhaps the Tristana as a possibility, the Varus and the Jhin there as well.
So now the question is, do they look to lock in a top laner, or will they go for mid? Looking at some of the options that they have available, Talia could be something that G2 want to draft if they want to go into the middle lane. Zoe is another potential after she did get buffed not too long ago. They could bring the Swain down into the mid and put something like a Vladimir up top, but it looks like they are going to go for the Zoe instead.
Such pick potential on this G2 lineup now. You've got the Skarner, the Thresh, the Jhin with the Deadly Flourish, the long-range Sleepy Trouble Bubble from Perks in that mid lane as well, and Splyce. We wanted to see them with better lanes. Well, they're going to have to find a strong AD carry if they're going to be able to push into a Jhin and a Thresh.
Varus could be the option here. Nope, they're going back to the Sivir, the late game insurance. It did fine for them in Game 1, and even if they cannot find themselves an early lead, they at least have that late game potential with Kobe. Their team fighting is still decent, especially with the Mega Gnar and Olaf trying to cause a terror onto this low mobility backline from G2.
So looking for team fights from Splyce as expected. Maybe a little bit more in the early game from Xerxes. when his jungle proximity goes up, when he's able to make plays early on, that's when Splyce really come alive. G2, on the other hand, once again, double AP. Only that one tank in the form of Skarner, but if Wonder gets ahead, he'll get pretty tanky as the game progresses.
Now, I really would like to see a cleanse from Niski. I feel it is very, very risky against a Thresh, a Zoe, and a Swain to not go cleanse. Largely because of the insane pick potential that this comp does have. Like, think about it, right? Either a hook lands or a Sleepy Trouble Bubble lands, the chain CC is immense.
You're just dead.
Yeah, you have Jhin, you have Swain, you have Skarner, you've got everything. It's going to be really exciting to see how G2 execute this pick composition. But what I'm expecting from G2, a lot of ganks mid lane. That's for sure. I'm expecting Skarner to look for a lot of opportunities, especially given that Niski will be running the heal. And for Splyce, they have more winning lanes. The Nash should do fine up into the Swain at top lane. I'm imagining that Ryze should, in terms of early push, be fine into the Zoe. And we'll see what they can do with slightly stronger lanes.
Game 3 of a best of 5. We're basically in a best of 3 now, Vedia. Splyce versus G2. 3 games between one of these teams and the finals in Copenhagen. I totally mispronounced that. Copenhagen. We'll just go with the normal pronunciation there. And so G2 in the early game are going to look towards mid. They've got the pick potential. They've got the Skarner, the Zoe.
That's what I would do.
How are Splyce going to answer?
Yeah, so that's what I would do. I think that it would make sense to try and get a little bit more pressure for the Zoe, because remember that she kind of got hard nerfed, and then she had a couple of changes come back to her. So her early wave clear is one of the big things that was hit, and once she gets around level 9, is where her wave clear gets back to what it kind of was. So she can one-shot the casters, and she has a little bit more pressure. And also, like, the mana cost changes mean that she can't just spam spells during the laning phase, which is why I would arguably give the early laning push and pressure over to Ryze. And he can also hide behind a lot of the minions during the laning phase. But excited to see Zoe back. Much more of a positive sentiment seems to be revolved around her. But she can still hit like a truck.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big important things to remember. Sleepy Trouble Bubble, still super obnoxious, still puts you to sleep for, like, years. And we'll see how Perks is able to pull it off.
See how Niski's able to answer in that mid lane on the rise. Splyce doing something up, changing up that level 1. Now catch out Jankos. He's in positioning in a place where he can flash, binding. Jankos flashes away. Does still get hit, and that will be a red buff going across towards Splyce. No smite used either by Xerxes.
Now, this is Splyce recognizing that Jankos, when he plays Skarner, will do a solo clear to allow Hyanan and Wadid to get into lane faster, but Hyanan and Wadid have now been able to push an entire wave. They aren't quite able to zone Corbett and Kasing away from it, but there's a couple of early CS that will be lost. So the question is, will the advantage gained from this Olaf steal be enough for the deficits that Corbett and Kasing should suffer early on?
I think putting Jankos behind is so important for Splyce when Jankos has been so good at objective control in the early game. Those level 4 dragons, both games G2 have got both of the first Drakes and get the Rift Herald as well. So we'll have to see if Jankos is actually far enough behind now that Splyce can sustain through that early game.
Odo going to drop a ward because he's expecting Jankos to be on the blue buff. He is also relatively low, but he'll be able to clear that, get level 3 and walk away. So now Splyce have full information on what Jankos is up to. One of the great things about Skarner is that he has a lot of early wave clear, so it shouldn't take him too long to just scurry on through the rest of his jungle, while Xerxes does the same. Now, what's Jankos going to do? Shove a ward over the wall? For some reason, I had this weird thought in my head that he was going to flash over the wall to dodge on the wards, and then go for a steal. But
that would have been pretty aggressive from Jankos.
He also doesn't have a flash.
You have to remember as well, like, he's never been to a finals of an EU LCS, so maybe that's how desperate he is to get there. He and Odawamne played together on H2K for a number of years, had 3 semi-finals together, have had a total of 5 each, and have never won a semi-final. One person is going to be able to break this semi-finals curse today. Whether it'll be Jankos or Oda, we are still yet to see.
Yeah, they talked about it on the analyst desk. We want to highlight it once more. We even heard Jankos say how it's kind of sad because also in North America, Prolly and Febivan are going up against each other in North America semi-finals. And it's just a lot of the former H2K players trying to find their way into the final, trying to find their way to success on their new organizations and teams.
I still have this theory that we're going to get to Game 5, someone's going to be about to take down the Nexus, and then the game's just going to crash because no H2K player is ever allowed to make it to finals. The world just doesn't work that way. Once again, we see the push from G2's bottom lane. Hyanan and Wadid forcing Kasing and Kobe back in the lane, but not too monumental an advantage taken anywhere on the map as of yet. And, have to see how this game does develop from here. You can see the vision control for G2 is strong in the river. Xerxes going to spot out that control ward and clear it away.
So we talked a little bit about the lane matchups, and obviously now Hyanan and Wadid have been able to build a pretty big lead in the bot lane because of how the level 1 played out. Perks did get pushed underneath his tower, but he's done an excellent job of farming up. Now the top lane was the interesting one for me because, gotta be honest, I haven't seen a huge amount of Swain into Gnar. And it looks like so far that Wonder has had the advantage, but Odoame seems to be doing fine in terms of the lane plays. He hasn't been forced to use his pod at all. He's been holding his own for the most part. He's just sitting at a bit of a lane deficit, and I imagine a lot of that comes from when he's in this Mega Gnar form, and it's a lot harder for him to approach the wave, given that that's kind of what this champion excels at, punishing those melee, slow-moving champions.
When you look at the lore of Swain and how he actually works as a champion, it's pretty dark. He rips fragments of his enemies' souls out.
Right.
That's what the birds represent. And then he explodes as a demon and explodes those souls all over his enemies again and kills them.
So what you're telling me is that Deficio is actually the counter to Swain because he has no soul?
Sounds about right. Or anyone ginger as well. That probably works. Splyce, this is what we talked about though, Vedius. Jankos push behind in the early game. Splyce get control of the bottom side river, and they will go for the Mountain Drake. First time we've seen one of those this series. Something Olaf can do so well, because the lower health you are, the easier it is to take down an objective.
They also had the push on bot, and Niski had priority over mid as well, so it made it very easy to get in, get the vision down, make sure he had control over the river, and overall should be fine in the bottom side. So early Mountain Drake secured for Splyce.
And I think...
Ooh, is this a gank?
Jankos is looking for something, but he's just going to
back off.
Back away. Every time you expect him to do something, Vedius, he just doesn't do it.
Yeah, but that's all right.
He's just going to get a wall.
Gives us more time to talk. I feel like you got something on your mind, mate.
I want to talk about Hyanan.
That's fair.
Because across the course of the split, he's been not the best AD carry. He's
been criticized, I feel.
To the highest level in the regular season, was behind in lane. His damage wasn't the best. Damage percentage was okay. And this series, although his laning phase has been a little bit weak, he's stepping up to the plate a little bit more in terms of damage per minute and damage percentage.
I mean, I did feel that his impact so far in this series has been a little higher, but you can see that he's actually performing very similar to what we had from the regular season, and you kind of have to criticize him for a lot of poor decisions that he made in the mid-game. Like, he was a large part of why they lost Game 1. He was also someone that after G2 got the Baron in Game 2, he ended up getting caught out. And Hyanan is still someone that not kind of performing to the expectations that many G2 members have of an AD carry, especially when the former AD carry was Sven. So we'll see how he continues to perform in this game.
Kasing misses the binding, puts the black shield down. Niski here on the flank as well, but so is Perks. And as I expected something to happen, nothing does.
Well, the black shield kind of made it super difficult. Kasing wasn't forced to flash there. We'll be able to heal back up as well. And now, just standard laning. Just looking across the board and seeing if this is a bad thing for anyone, really. And, like, you kind of expect Splyce to look for a couple of early plays, but not so early that it's super important for them to get the snowball. And G2, they have a couple of options across the board. Jankos now taking advantage of one of those options.
Smite, great Gnar into the wall there, though, by Odoamne. He's felt the sting of Jankos many a time, and this time says, oh, no, you don't. Pushes him away.
He's got his insect repellent out. He's able to force him back. We'll be able to survive that gank. Still a little bit behind in terms of farm by going for an early... or it looks like, rather, he's gone for an early... Why do I always forget the name of that? Blue cloak that gives you a lot of magic resistance.
Spectre's Cowl?
Spectre's Cowl. I have no idea. Like, it's such a common item, too. I say it all the time. And then the moment I need it, the brain's just like, no, I will not help you on this one.
I'm going to be slightly pedantic only because I know we'll get tweeted about it.
Yeah.
Scorpions aren't arachnids. Aren't insects. Arachnids, technically.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So insect repellent would not work?
No, it wouldn't work. That's why he had to use his arms.
I see.
It's like, I spray it's like mosquito spray, right? You spray yourself tons, and then you get bitten anyway, so you just have to slap him out of the air.
Wait, but then surely... But a mosquito is an insect.
Yes.
So insect repellent should work.
It should, but it doesn't.
I see.
Yeah. Those insects are just too darn feisty. Now pushing the bot lane here for Kobe and Kasing. They're going to get some damage down on towards this tower. It's much more what Splyce want to do, and even early game has allowed them to start to get some chip damage down, but not too much as of yet, Vedius.
Just eyes always get drawn to the minimap, looking at the vision. You can see now Kobe and Kasing have really reclaimed pressure over this lane phase. You talked a little bit about how Morgana does pretty well into the threat thanks to the Black Shield, mitigating a lot of the engage tools, along with Jhin, who can't really trade that effectively against the Sivir because of the spell shield that she has to block his grenades. Means that they constantly get pushed. And I mean, like, wave clear from Sivir is always super obnoxious too, so... Yadid, Yanan and Wadid. Yadid is now the term of the duo. They can't really find much pressure, so they're just being forced to farm underneath their tower, and that is allowing Splyce to get a lot of vision control towards the bot side, which G2 have now reclaimed.
Yet to see that powerful impact from Xerxes. Yeah, Odoamne is going to get the stun on towards Wonder, who
He's going to flash.
Can flash. Does have the 5 stacks on that ulti. We'll just use it to clear out the wave instead. Odo had a flash of his own. We'll have TP up soon as well, so it's just an ultimate trade there.
I imagine Wonder probably wants to go back if he's just used his ulti. By using the ulti, it creates pressure on the 1 versus 1. Ooh, Drowsy.
Xerxes is here though. Perk's going to try and land the Paddle Star. Predator comes out as well. Nisqy turns onto Perks. Let's have the Protobelt. Paddle Star doesn't connect.
Xerxes running very quickly right now.
Speedy. Drowsy connects, so Jankos might look for the stun. Ragnarok comes out. And once again, a trade of ultimates in the mid lane.
It's a very slow early game so far. Saw a very tense close matchup in game 1. Now we see... Ooh, we did. I completely forgot about that spell shield. Also a great tool for mitigating the pick power of Thresh.
That means the hook doesn't stick on you as well. Here comes the Exorbitant engage to be on the hunt. The rest of Splyce are on their way down as well. Kiana gets out of the Soul Shackles, gets back with the lantern as well. We did. Flashes away. Wonder and Jankos here. The catapult coming up from the side as well. Now gets the first kill. Splyce pushing forward. G2 have one for their own. Perks in from the side. Kobe. Everyone's flashing away. The flash from Xerxes is not enough to get him to safety, and G2 have turned this head. They'll turn this fight right back around on its head. Odo pulled back by the root. G2 will get 2 kills.
Wow, all 5 members down into the bottom lane very early on. But G2 were the team that were able to find the win. Multiple low members on Splyce mean that they cannot defend this turret. And it's G2 to successfully find the fight.
Great fight by them. They're going to get first tower blood out of this as well. And perhaps that snowball has started once again. 12 minutes in, they are 2,000 gold ahead.
So let's see how this all starts. Kasing knows that both Olaf and Ryze are on their way bot. Everyone's level 6. TP is ready. Flash in into binding. Secures a very easy kill onto Wadid. Oh, Odo actually has to flash in. And because they overextend, Wonder can then get into the backline thanks to the TP. He doesn't have his ulti due to the early skirmish that happened up top. And that if he had, this fight could have ended so much worse for Splyce. Fortunately, Odoamne is there to body block for Kobe, so he doesn't lose his life to the Jhin. And Perks doesn't feel confident enough to continue on with the chase. They take the tower, they take the kills, and they get themselves an early gold lead. But the execution, or the decision-making there from Splyce was pretty positive, but they didn't quite respect the turnaround potential from G2.
See Splyce decide to swap up towards the top side, knowing that that's where Kianan and Wadid will be going shortly. Luden's Echo finished on Perks as well on this Zoe. Hit that level 9 mark where he should be able to clear out the waves a little bit easier. And we still haven't really seen that much of Xerxes' spark, that much of his ingenuity in this game or in the last. The first game was relatively good, but apart from taking that Mountain Drake, he hasn't really impacted the map.
I mean, I must say, like, I'm just looking at his options on where he could gank. We just kind of talk about how bot lane could be an option, and we have seen him now gank towards the bot side. So even though there wasn't a huge amount of action pre-10, I don't want to be too critical of them, given that I felt that both compositions probably wanted to wait a little bit before they tried to force that many plays.
Just for me, Vedius, you know, Jankos has been taking Xerxes to school in this series. He's just so much stronger on that objective control as a jungler. The Rift Tower, though, this game, objective control from Splyce has been a lot better. The Sleepy Trouble Bubble comes out. Deadly Flash does not connect. Rift Tower still propped. Kobe's going to run up towards the top side, but Kianan and Wadid could chase him if they wish. Instead, they're just going to get the vision control of the river. Rift Tower will reset.
Yeah, Mountain is on the cards right now. Just looking as to where Wonder's mid. So he's actually used the window that he generated bot through the minion wave to move up with his team. He doesn't have TP, which should allow G2 to have priority over this objective. And Odo can only really answer by going for the Matt and Drake himself. Now, will Xerxes try to go for a steal?
So a really important thing about this Rift Herald as well is the steal might come in, doesn't quite. G2 backing away. Kasing caught out with the dead push.
Good on.
Flash in onto Kobe as well. Pops the spell shield. He's not going to escape. Kasing's running right the wrong way, straight into the jaw of a tower. And G2 will get 2 kills and the Rift Herald for themselves.
Now, Splyce do have priority over mid, so they're trying to answer with a turret of their own, which I believe they can secure, but good engage there from G2. Corbett was not expecting his Scarlet to come over the wall and ult him instantly. He still had the spell shield afterwards. But G2 continuing with the pressure. They had great early game success in game 1, and they're continuing with that momentum in game 2.
Getting the Rift Herald opens up so much more of the map for them as well. It can be hard to siege a tower when you're playing against a Ryze and a Sivir. We talked about it a little bit in game 1. Their wave clear makes it pretty difficult, but now they've got the Rift Herald, it opens up the opportunity for them to push towards it. We'll see the splash engagement from Jankos across the wall.
Yeah, really good ult there. Corbett just doesn't have vision of it. You can see there was a spell shield coming out afterwards. Unfortunately for him, he just can't react in time. If he had, it would have also been super clutch, but unlucky. And then Kasing also gives away his life. Now, he has changed with teleport. Curious as to what he'll be able to do with that. And also keep your eyes on Wonder right now on your minimap. So when you push a wave in like this, when it's super far overextended, this creates a window with which your team can look to try and take advantage of. So often you'll see like the individual move and group up with the rest of his team. And that's kind of what Wonder did just before with the Rift Herald play. He's basically just forcing back and taking advantage of the fact that he's stronger player in the 1 versus 1. So now that he's created another window, he's going to group up with the Skarner, likely move towards mid and take advantage of this Rift Herald to secure themselves the mid tier.
Yeah, all 5 players from G2 are sitting around this mid lane now. I don't think Splyce are going to be able to answer too much. Might be just setting up for a defense of the tier 2.
So while that tower goes down, would you like to know a fun fact?
Oh, hit me with a fun fact.
You know what the Welsh word for window is?
Fenestre.
It is! He actually knows that it is, in fact, that is the Welsh word. Fenestre.
Do you want to know why?
Why do you know that?
Because it's the same in French.
Oh.
So
wow.
I was just like, so the cool word, the really cool word is defenestrate,
okay.
which means to throw someone out of a window. That's where I know it from. Wow. The Latin must be finessed or something.
Well, there we are. Fun facts across the board. Now, G2, their eyes are set on this top tower. Perkz making a roam up towards it with the vision control they do have in the river. I don't know if they can secure anything because Xerxes is lying in wait.
Can come out from Niski as well. The engage from Udik, but he's stuck underneath this tower. He falls. Great stuff from Xerxes. And Splyce are on the chase. Flash away. Heal as well from Hyeon and Perkz. Looking for the paddle onto Niski. Splyce will not get too much more out of this, but can push for that top lane tower.
Yeah, very over-eager play there and a really good punish from Splyce. Xerxes recognized that if G2 is going to look for anything, it'll be this finer out of tower up in the top lane. He moved towards the top side. He was ready for the counter gank, and given that Woodid went in by himself, along with the Realm Warp to follow up, G2 couldn't help support their support, and he ends up going down.
This game is so back and forth. We saw it in game 1. It seems to be a repeat here where Dit just goes too deep.
Yeah, just look at the minimap. You can see that Xerxes is already in a position alongside Niski to support, and Perkz cannot assist. They're not expecting the 4 members of Splyce to show up to the top side of the map and then suddenly get this counterplay. So now Splyce get themselves a tower back on the board. Still behind in gold a little bit, but overall, game still very even, as you rightly identified.
So something we haven't actually hit on too much is the scaling of both these compositions. Who comes out stronger in the late game? Because I look on one side and I say, you've got Sivir, she's always good. 500 CS, Sivir win condition, right? And then I look on the other side and I say, well, you've got 2 AP carries, Swain's been really strong, Zoe can poke out and do a lot of damage as well. Where's the balance lie if we get late in the game?
So the thing is with both these compositions is they kind of have a bit of everything, so you kind of have to evaluate relative to one another. Now, we can start with the top lane, right? Swain is always going to have stronger late game team fight value than a Gnar is, right? And in terms of the side lane, it should be Swain favored because of his wave clear, but once you get a lot of items under your belt, I could see the Gnar being able to out-pressure the Swain in terms of the 1v1, but I still think that Swain should have the overall late game advantage. In terms of the mid laners, Perks will not be able to offer the same sort of team fight value, but he has so much pick threat that you have to respect it. This is a great example of what I mean. Cleanse and the Black Shield being forced to use to get out of that situation. And as the game progresses, he's going to be a big late game threat. But Sivir is always going to outscale the Jhin in terms of team fight value. So both have team fight threat, but you would argue that G2 have more, but simply because it's Zoe and she's single target and her positioning and her ability to land skill shots are what's so important. It's going to come down to execution on the side of G2, which is a little bit harder than that of Splyce, who basically just want to hit the person in front of them, which is going to be so much easier to do when you have a Ryze, a Sivir, the Gnar, and the Olaf. So I think execution is going to be a big thing in this.
Jankos wins the smite fight against Xerxes for control of the red buff, which is great for him. Sleep from across the wall onto Niski forces him to wait a second before he can actually clear out that wave. And we see Wonder's actually moved up to join the rest of G2 here. As a 5-man unit, they're going to push for this final outer tower. Olo should be able to secure bot lane as well. He's got a wave pushing towards it, so it is just going to be a tower trade. And interesting to see G2 giving the gold across towards Hyanon here. They want to get that Jhin up towards the second and third items.
I think it's absolutely fine. Just trying to distribute the gold relatively evenly. They know that both mid and top are doing pretty well, given they have 8 kill and 2 assists, whereas Hyanon very assist-focused. And also, he probably told his team, hey guys, I just need a bit more gold and I can get my rapid-fire cannon, so they're like, okay. This one time, we'll give it to you, Hyanon.
Has got a 35 CS lead over that Sivir as well, doing a good job of shutting Cobber down. A lot of that will come, of course, down towards that bot lane tower. Jankos actually out Niski, pops the suppression down as well. Perks on his way. Remember, the Sleepy Trouble Bubble can go through the walls. Realm Warp out. Niski escapes and the blue buff goes to Perks.
The cooldown on the E still very, very long there for Jankos, so he couldn't quite pop it a second time to interrupt Niski's ult. Will steal away the blue buff successfully though, so small advantage gain for G2, but notice that there's actually no pressure up in the top side, so Splyce will get a free wave, farm will be lost, but Perks gets himself a Rabadons. And we're seeing this a lot more as a second item, so because after the buffs, you get more AP, and it's considered just more value.
But the percentage increase
as well, yeah.
The base AP that you do get from it, as you say, Ocean Drake across to G2 here. And the last few minutes, it felt very Jankos heavy. He seems to be pushing forward into the Splyce jungle a lot more than Xerxes is getting into his jungle. Seems like just G2 are on the front foot a little bit more at the moment.
I must admit that Xerxes' Olaf so far has not impressed me. He hasn't had the same kind of impact that he's had on things like the Sejuani and the Zac, even his Skarner as well. But they did put an early priority in it in the draft. We'll see what else he can do. Now we get to see this 1v1 that we were talking about a little earlier.
Wonder ripping the souls out of the minions, going to Oda1 as well, but that adaptive helm reduces the damage on towards the Gnar, so Oda1 is happy just to push him away, wait for the ultimate to come off cooldown, and then switch back to mini Gnar form.
But you can see there that when the ultimate is up, Gnar will not win. But once it's down, and he has the range advantage, along with the adaptive helm, I feel like he trades pretty well now. Good pick here. Doesn't land quite, though. The follow-up isn't there from G2, so Zeus is able to walk away, doesn't have to use his ulti.
And as much as G2 have pick potential, you have to remember you've got Ragnarok coming out from the Olaf, you've got the Black Shield as well. Perks cleanses away, but the Predator comes in. Jankos looking for the chase on towards Niski. Perks jumps forward once again with the portal jump. Teleport coming out from Wonder as G2 try and force the fight a little bit more. Both teleports were cancelled.
A 1v1 skirmish towards the Raptors. Wonder being forced back. Summoner spells being used across the board. Nothing really gained just yet, though. Game still very steady, still very even. G2 slight lead. A couple of second items have been finished. It's tense, Medic.
It is.
We've had 3 different games, I feel.
Yeah, first game was G2 trying to win and Splyce being willing to scale.
Second a lot of skirmishing and fighting.
Second game was G2 snowballing.
Yeah.
And this game has been, both teams seem seemingly content with scaling a little bit,
yes,
but also trying to make picks.
Yes, I feel like it's just been a much more slow, steady kind of game. Here we go.
Twin Shadows, he's going to flash the wall. He's got the second flash, though. Does get him to safety. Baron aggroed.
Ooh. He's fine.
Yes.
Calculated. Not entirely sure where he got that second flash. Did he already have
So
it
he had one on his spell thief, and then he used his own one as well.
Got it. That's what I assumed it happened, but I just wanted to make sure. Thank you for the clarification there, Medic. Now the blue buff is up. They will likely want to give that over to Perks as Splyce gain river control. Very important with the Baron up, and there's another big question for us. Who has the faster Baron? I think that when you have a Jhin and a Zoe, you automatically have the slower Baron. Yeah. So Splyce, if they ever kick things off, should be in a much healthier situation to burn that objective down. Whereas G2, they're going to need either a big commitment towards the bot side of the map from Splyce, or they need to find a couple kills before they can feel confident rushing that objective down.
Have to remember the story behind a lot of these players and these teams as well. G2, 4-time consecutive champions, the first time it's ever been done in the EU LCS, looking for their 5th title. They would tie Fnatic as the most crowned team in EU LCS. Splyce never won a championship, always been challenging for it. 2016 they were in the finals against G2, they fell then. Will they fall at the final hurdle here as well? The suppression comes down. Look at the damage on Odo Omne, caught out once again by Jankos. The Splyce have to retreat. Xerxes is going to get away down towards the bottom side of this fight. The G2 started the Baron and called Splyce out.
Now that was the pick power that we talked about, except G2 used it in a very creative way where they started the Baron, forced Splyce to come near it, and then immediately turned with all of their single target CC to just burst the target down. It ended up being Odo Omne, they find the kill, and now they're back on the Baron.
Kobe pushes forward onto Perks because the flash finally came out, but Kobe's all alone, just trying to take out the King. Cannot get in, the Unstoppable comes out as well, off towards the top side of the fight, but G2 once again make a catch and get a kill. Niski chasing onto Jankos, instead settles for another Arachnoid, the Scuttle.
Now, this is still pretty good for G2 because look at the bottom lane. A huge minion wave has just been lost to the tower. They still had priority over mid, and while they will lose a couple of their buffs, 2 quick kills and pressure around Baron is exactly what G2 wanted. Now, Splyce, like, they're doing what they can, really. You know, they're trying to stop G2 from being able to force this Baron. They want to try and get some vision control, but G2, they just have so much single target CC. If any single one of them lands, you just get obliterated. And G2 demonstrating how to execute upon that cop. And here they start off the Baron again. They want to do exactly the same thing. Flash into binding. And Kobe just wants to go in for the kill, but that ends up being his undoing. Now they're back at the Baron. CP comes in from Odo.
And teleport in from Odo, Omne. Xerxes there on the chase. Baron disengaged by G2.
But this is fine. They want the TP. They get it out from Odo. Now they can just send Wonder down towards the bot side. No, he has the TP advantage. And Odo is in a really dire spot because now he's being the one. He is the one that is being forced to group up with his team. So now they're the ones rushing them. But this is fast.
They're going to do it very quickly. Jankos coming in with the Predator as well. 4,000 HP on the Baron. They're on the hunt, chasing for Jankos, who has to flash away. But now the rest of G2 are in the river.
So now they go back to the Baron. G2, they should gain control of it. Do they need to rush it down? Just looking at some of the ultis that are available. Xerxes has just come back up. Corbez is down. Perk's going to push up mid, but I believe everything is up for G2 except the flash from Jankos. So they should be in a better position to force the fight right now, but Odo's Mega Knight is about to come up.
Trying to look for the connection. Odo walks into the sleep. Baron started 6,000 left on that. The curtain call comes out, forcing Xerxes away, forcing Kobe and Ode to back to
Odo might be dead.
Jungle. Odo's still alive. Niski coming in from the flank. The binding doesn't connect. Xerxes put to sleep. The Baron disengaged though by G2 and re-engaged once again. Kobe on Perks. 2,000 HP on the Baron. This is it. This is the defining moment of this game. G2 on the Baron. It's down to 1,000 HP. Xerxes being forced away. The Baron falls. Can Splyce get anything out of this? We're dead and Yarnan forcing them back, but Niski flashes forward. He wants to carry his team to glory, but he just can't quite do enough. And G2 are going to escape with the kill. Perks pull back the cleanse away. G2 escape and get the Baron.
So tense there for G2, but they get everything that they wanted. A kill, a Baron, and an escape that results in another huge lead gained. Splyce, they are getting separated. They cannot find the fights that they want. Kobe is uncharacteristically underperforming. This Splyce roster is being rooted right now by the current champions. Let's see how it all kicks off. So Odo gets chunked out right from the start of the fight. The poke damage from G2 is monstrous. You can see Niski trying to come in from the flank, try and put a bit of poke down himself, but Odo and Kobe just cannot get involved. 2 of their key team fighters are being zoned single-handedly by Perks. you also have Wonder zoning away 3 members in the top side, and G2 just say, okay, let's just rush it down, let's finish the Baron. And then they go hard disengage. Woodid tries to go for a bit of a flash play there, almost gets punished for it, but then the rest of them get out. And then here, just a bit of a mistake from Wonder, thinking he can help his team. Oh, Perks. He blast goes back into the team by mistake. But still, G2, they walk out, and you just see the power of Zoe in this kind of environment where the enemy team wants to try and walk towards you, and she has so much poke, so much CC, single target CC, that it ends up being a very difficult for Splyce to truly contest.
And once again, it's Wonder and Perk stepping up to the plate. They were the ones zoning out Splyce. And they are the ones carrying this team towards a victory. Jankos, Jan, and Woodid have done great jobs as well. But Wonder and Perks are the guys they put the carry potential on. Now they're pushing in towards these inhibitors. It's just 2 outer towers left for them to take as well. A 5,000 gold lead extended for G2. And the game is looking almost over. If G2 play this Baron out properly, they have a minute left on it. Look for that final tower in the bottom lane, then they can go for Drake, then they can set for the next Baron. As soon as you start to lose those outer towers, you lose any chance of getting strong vision control in your own jungle.
It's very true. Splyce doing what they can to just make sure that all of their options are not taken away from them.
The good thing for them is they're only 200 CS away from their win condition. As soon as Kobe gets to 500 CS, we all know Civic can't lose.
Right.
That's the way it works.
So only 200 CS needed.
195 now.
Wow.
Less.
I like your optimism.
I'm a very optimistic person.
Yeah, I can feel that. You know, always try and look at the bright side. Infinity Edge yet to be completed. So Corbett probably going to want that before he relies on that 500 CS win condition, as G2 look to secure themselves their 2nd and 4th Drake overall in the game. Just looking across some of the items. Ooh, Zhonya's now completed for Wonder as well. Rather terrifying item. Void Staff finished 3rd for Perks. Wow. Going all in terms of Poke. Let's see if he finds a pick onto anyone. Oh, Drowsy.
Redemption comes out as well.
Look at the damage.
One pushed away. Just going for the tower here. G2 will secure the final outer tower, and then they can just push towards these inhibitors as well. As you say, damage onto Odoame was magnificent. Splyce trying to defend, but they just cannot do enough at the moment. They hold on to their tower for the time being, but Perks and Wonder now going to push in the mid lane. It's just a game of back and forth as Splyce have been in this position many times before. Do not have an answer right now.
The poke from G2 is just monstrous. We talked about how G2's comp is a little harder to execute, but they are making it look easy. The constant chain of CCs that they have, just throwing out the Sleepy Trouble Bubble, the Jin W, the Thrash Hook, Skana E, I guess. Just everything.
Fracture.
So difficult for Splyce to really deal with. And now G2, they're going to reset once more. Elder Drake not going to be up for a while because the Drake recently went down. And Baron not really on the cards for about another 2.5 to 3 minutes. So G2 will likely just look to mainly take control over the enemy jungle after clearing out their own, steal away more camps, starve Splyce from even more resources, and then wait for the Baron to respawn before looking to try and end the game. And very similarly to game 2, this is G2's game to lose at this point.
Felt relatively even in the mid game, but that Baron fight really just swung it in G2's favor. They are looking to go 2-1 up in this series and be one step closer to those finals in Copenhagen.
You know, and I will say, like, we had a bit of a discussion on is it worth banning the Swain? And just, you looked at that Baron fight and you see how he was zoning 3 members away. You kind of have to go, you know what? Maybe you just kind of have to ban it.
I wonder if we should give the best top laner in Europe at the moment the strongest champion in the game at the moment. I wonder where it could go wrong for us. Well, at the moment...
Wonder yes or wonder no?
Tweet Alex.
So, G2 looking for a pick, as they usually do with this comp.
Baron up in a minute for them as well. You can see, even if Splyce finds some way to engage, you've got a Mikhail's on Woodid to try and keep his team safe. The push in the bottom lane by Wonder. Now he rotates up. He moves up to join his team. The ult coming out from Kianan. Xerxes didn't get connected by that Sleepy Trouble Bubble. May have hit the spell shield on towards Corbett as well. You can see the goal lead. This is an extension from G2. This is more methodical than previous games, and now they're just going for that mid lane inhibitor. So they should secure relatively easily. Odo not really near Mega Knight, just gonna get jumped on flash, jumps across the wall. With the cleanse, it comes out.
The QSS.
The QSS from Odo, that makes sense.
Will end up getting used there, so he will be forced to back away. But the front line down, G2 have their eyes set on the bottom tier 2 tower. They don't even need the Baron at this point. They just realized, oh, wait a minute. So he's really fed. And if we land a single bit of CC, you're gonna die. So now with the pressure that they've generated, they've actually said, you know what? Okay, worst case scenario is Splyce find a fight, we lose, they get Baron, they stall, we then lose game. So they said, you know what? We'll take the min inhib, we'll reset, we'll go to set up around Baron, and then we'll make this our primary win condition rather than gambling on another tier 2 tower, tier 3 tower.
Baron's only coming up in 10 seconds or so, and as much as Zoe is ahead and Perks is ahead, I want to look at Kjarnan as well. He's at 4 completed items on this Jhin. He's sitting about 2,000 gold ahead of his counterpart. It's quite a strong lead for the AD carry. Rumble going to come out here, they're just looking at the Baron Splyce. Straight on it, and straight off it. That was...
I mean, it was done in the middle lane, in plain sight, when G2 had control over the river. They're now forced to retreat. Look at Wonder flanking. Ooh, this could be big. He doesn't have the rest of his team there.
Only 3 soul fragments on him as well. Means he won't do as much damage with his ultimate. He isn't spotted out yet. Now he is. And Splyce...
Oh, he actually used the W on the brush to bait Splyce into thinking that he wasn't in there. An old school strat from back in the day.
Clairvoyance strat.
Yeah.
Fnatic used to do that.
You clairvoyance your own bush.
Ooh, Xerxes not in the best of positions.
Does have
here.
ult.
Mid lane push is coming out. Odoamne trying to chase on towards Perks. There's the Drowsy copy with the on the hunt as well. With the QSS, Perks has to flash away. The flash chase from Odo, and Perks will fall. The king is dead, and now Splyce are looking to close this one out. The Nexus tower minions are there though, so Splyce cannot go for the Baron just quite yet. Someone needs to deal with those minions. We're gonna pop the ult.
That's pretty big though for Splyce. Now they can actually be the ones. I don't know if they can start the Baron just yet, but they can definitely set up for it. Minions still walking down the middle lane. You identified this early. TP was used for Kasing, now they kicked it off.
It's a Baron brawl for the game. A curtain call from the side. Kjarnan trying to close the hopes of Splyce. Yanko's in that front line. He is caught up. This question comes out. It's only one to Niski though. Yanko's still alive. Niski.
Oh, look at Kjarnan!
But Kjarnan! The carry on the back line takes out 2. The Baron goes, but Ko is dead. It's the triple. The Jhin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looking for the quadra kill here as well, but can't quite close it out on Odo.
They want to get to him.
In. It's a curtain call for Splyce, and it's curtains for this game.
G2 with a massive team fight, just as we talk about if Kjarnan can be the carry. The moment his leader falls, he steps up to the plate, he gets the team fight win, and he's gonna take G2 to match point.
That's the Kjarnan we know and love from Rocket. That's the Kjarnan we've been waiting to see all split. 2 carries on G2, I'll raise you 1 and make it 3. Kjarnan pulls G2, kicking and screaming to a 2-1 lead in this series.
Slightly slower early game, a bit more of a back and forth. But when the Baron came into being the primary objective, G2 utilized their pick comp so effectively, using the Baron as a bait to draw their opposition in, draw Splyce into a fight that they weren't ready to take. And they found successful fights, and so many people came up clutch. The fact that in that Baron fight, both Perks was zoning 2 members, Wonder was zoning 3, the rest of G2 focused down the Baron. And then Kjarnan coming up huge in that final team fight, getting himself the unofficial quadra kill, but securing himself the ace.
He was playing Jhin, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a perfect symmetry.
It's unfortunate because in the stats it won't come up as a quadra kill, but we all know it truly was.
Yes. It's one of those times you get an S instead of an S plus and you're frustrated because that quadra kill should have counted. But great stuff from G2. Splyce, on the other hand, I don't want to say it all comes down to draft because they obviously had an idea of how they wanted to deal with this Swain.
Yep.
But it did not work for them at all. And now they have side selection, expect them to go on blue. And I really expect G2 just to ban Swain.
Yeah, and it's it kind of comes back to one of the big differences that we identified coming into this series, which is that for Splyce, they're actually very reliant on Xerxes being this spark, the ignition for the team that kind of gets the team going. He's the guy that starts team fights. He's the guy that gets the team early leads. And if he's not able to do that, Splyce kind of look like what they were at the beginning of the split, where they get to these late game situations, they rely on late game fights, whereas G2, they have carries all across the board that can build their own leads. You have pressure top, you have pressure mid, you have pressure jungle, and as we just saw, you have pressure on your AD carry as well.
Oh, G2 have brought us to match point, so Shox, break it down for us.
I will break it down with my analyst. That is 2-1 on match point for G2, and G2 is looking very, very good. We need to see some answers from Splyce. We'll get to that in a second, because first we want to see what exactly was so good about G2's second game. And we're going to start with an early replay, 11 minutes in the bot lane that got their first start, I would say. This is where the snowball started rolling for
So this
G2.
is the second time in the series where Splyce is going for a play on the bottom lane, and I definitely want to highlight Hyun here as the replay goes, where he's positioning so perfectly in front, like between the two players, that Cussing has to make a choice. Does he go for Wadid or does he go for Hyun?
So, do you agree with his choice?
I don't agree with Splyce's choice. I like the counterplay of G2 because they know that they have two TPs coming in. They know they have the Swain and the Zoe, who actually has a TP at this point, and they can actually counterplay this perfectly, where Hyun is going to walk out, he's actually going to walk into his own TPs and allow his own team to basically like just, you know, follow up, and he buys so much time with this and allows the counterplay for G2.
It bought enough time for Perkz to channel a full recall in mid, swap his cleanse for TP, and still TP into the fight to actually get to do something. But yeah, as you highlight, they got enough time there to actually get everyone down to take the fight. And once again, while this was not about the Swain being like broken, he gets some of the early kills from it. And we talked about answers in the last game. If you give G2 blue side again, and you give them Swain again, there's a plan. Like, there's something, you know.
But it wasn't.
The plan was then to early pick the Gnar, which was really strange to me because, like, first of all, Gnar in its own doesn't, like, shut down the Swain. I figured, okay, maybe then they're going to, like, hard play around the top side with the Olaf pick, because now they get an early game jungler instead of the Sejuani. But Cersei farmed. So I was like, now they're losing top again to Swain.
It all went pretty fast from that point on. It was kind of a write-off, I feel like, this game after the early pressure and with the Swain getting fed. And the rest of the game was really G2 making all the moves until in the end they got Baron. Yarnan gets an unofficial quadra kill, and I think that's also good for the side of G2 because we're talking a lot about Wonder and Perkz, but it must do wonders for his confidence and Yarnan that he's able to pull off this play. But what exactly, do you agree with the Hail Mary from Splyce? They had to do something.
I think the play in itself makes sense because they just killed Perkz. It's a 4v5 and Swain doesn't have ult. I think the only issue for them is that this draft from G2 has so much long-range poke and damage, and the side of Splyce are not really running a ton of like hard engage to then quickly turn into 4v5, and that made it difficult.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of hesitance from Splyce, because what I see here, for example, that they stall the Nashor for so long, they don't insta-rush it, they don't insta-burst it down, they try to like basically engage while doing it. So for them, it's down to almost like indecisiveness in these kind of situations. That's pretty concerning in the best of 5.
I do just think Yarnan played this one perfectly. Yeah. I think a lot of credit to G2 for playing out the 4v5 here. I think the Jhin pick specifically has proven to be perfect for Yarnan, where on the side of Splyce, they're still trying to figure out what exactly do they need to play in the bottom lane. This became a really awkward Sivir Morgana comp.
Why is that actually an issue? Because even when it wasn't going well for Splyce, the only thing that we did see is that the bottom lane, they didn't do really good in the early game, but they didn't get so destroyed to the point that they could never get back in the game. So why is that happening in this matchup?
It's a good question. I think the last game, it was them going Zillion over a more aggressive early support, so they could have had a pressure lane with Caitlyn, and then we wouldn't have had this discussion. In this one here, they valued getting Morgana coming into the second phase as the first pick and not go for the Jhin to take that away.
And they valued getting the individual lead in the jungle over the bottom lane lead, because as we saw in the level 1, for example, where they went into the enemy jungle, they took away the red buff, and that forced the bottom lane to basically miss out on lane priority. And I think that in itself basically created, again, a lack of win conditions for Splyce in the early game to play around, because they completely ignored the Gnar again.
So over the course of I would even say 2.5 games, because they still got in a deficit in game 1 as well. We've just identified a bunch of factors for Splyce. So let's now see what are the answers. What do we need to see from them? And I think it's clear that Swain needs to be taken off the table because they've shown that they have no answer for it, or they need to grab it for themselves.
Yeah, I think Splyce needs to get... So if Splyce will have side selection for the game, should grab blue side if they don't want to ban the Swain, and then they can either first pick it or force G2 to ban it. G2 in the first game removed Caitlyn, Xayah, and then the Zac against Xerxes. Yeah. So they very clearly tried to make sure that there was not a strong bot lane for Splyce to play around early game by banning those 2 AD carries. If they do the same, Swain goes over to Splyce.
So adaptation in the pick and ban in terms of Swain. Secondly, amazing, you talked about Xerxes already. Now, Xerxes helped Splyce a lot in the second half of the split. He had a lot of early game influence, and you made the remark over in the cast room that you feel that he hasn't surpassed that. He's doing kind of the same thing, and he isn't bringing extra to this best of 5.
I would even go as far to say that he actually regressed to his almost like early season stuff, where with the Zac being out, I think he almost looks, I don't want to say insecure, but he looks like he looks as if he has no inspiration whatsoever, where he doesn't find the place, he doesn't find this kind of X factor that I always like about Gilius, for example, where if your team needs a play, he's going to make it. And I think Xerxes so far, with Zac out, hasn't shown that kind of potential to do so.
That also doesn't sound like something that will magically get fixed in game 4. So is there any actionable things outside of the Swain getting picked away that you want to see them do? Do you want to see them pick maybe a bottom lane that can completely take over the enemy and snowball from there? Do you want to see Odo on a different pick? Oh, even though his Gnar wasn't bad, it's hard for us to come up with answers, so it must be even harder for Splyce at this point.
I would say thrive on what you're actually good at, and I think Splyce is a more consistently good team than G2. And what I mean by that is that they can play at a certain level more consistently than G2. G2 has highs and lows, and I think if you just play to that, you pick the better late game comp and have some win conditions early game that they actually play around perfectly, because I think Splyce has potential game understanding to do so. I think they can pull off at least and put it to match point in game 5.
Yeah, it's rough for me to hear when you say, well, G2 has highs and lows, because now for 2 games in a row, they've just completely steamrolled over
Splyce. Really good drafts.
Yeah.
Really good drafts.
Comes for them, where I feel like Splyce were not taking anything away from G2. They were trying to fix some of their own issues, but they didn't actually fix them. They just, in some ways, actually made them worse, going from game 2 to game 3. I think Splyce could go for late game drafts. Could be one way for them, like they did in game 1. I think G2's early game has been pretty good, and I think they've been pretty good around Baron as well, which has actually meant that Splyce couldn't just get easily to 4 items. I just feel like if you can get Swain on your side of Splyce, great. You suddenly have a strong champion you can rely on both early game and late. Otherwise, if you need one lane to play around, so far it seems like it can only be Odo Amne with how the picks and bans are going now. But they don't seem to want to fully invest into that. So it's kind of tough, and they might have to just go full late game then, because they feel like they don't have an actual winning lane.
That might be it. So for Splyce, the option might be just go full late game. Who is the guy that pushes G2 over the finish line in game 4?
I think it's Jankos.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the amount of aggression that he's shown early game and the amount of playmaking that he's shown is basically going to decide whether or not they're going to have to play game 5 or not.
And it would be a fantastic story for the side of Jankos. Has never made it to that final stage, has never been able to lift the cup. So if he gets G2 over the finish line into the final, it would be wonderful. We'll see if Splyce has something to say about that. G2 only 1 game away from their 5th consecutive final. Stick around to find out if they can do it or if Splyce manages to come back. We'll be back in 3.5.
I'm gonna play. Everyone's flashing away. The flash from Xerxes is not enough to get him to safety, and G2 have turned this head. Cool up, I do it down. Back flash. Can go for it. Got it. Back up. Kill.